Good enough. So, if you didn't know, this is where the story starts. I called out Mike Israetel 2 months ago for being a race realist when basically nobody else was doing so. What's your hair routine? I need help. Water. Leave-in conditioner. I don't know how to help you, Chatter. I don't know your story. Dr. Mike is a wire fork found in kitchen. But yeah, so here's how the video starts, just for context.
Yeah, just on YouTube alone, you've got Jeff Nipples, Lean Beef Patty, that guy who looks like a thumb learned how to blink. And the main thing I've learned from watching...
Honestly, not the worst creators he could have chosen.
Oh, I didn't know. I did not know what was in store for me.
Not the worst creators he could have chosen, actually. Those are actually not bad fitness creators. There are a lot of that suck. There are a lot of fitness creators that are really bad.
So much protein. You can't just go...
Wait, really? And he's a eugenicist? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? He's a race realist? Wrong, Dr. Mike. His name is literally Dr. Mike. The thumb on the screen? Oh, the thumb guy? Oh, but he was so normal. He was so normal, though. Where's his race realism?
Race.
For example, I'll just cut right into this. The GPT tells you, because you asked it, that your race or ethnic group is not the most intelligent of all of them, and maybe somewhere down the totem pole much further than you had anticipated. You may also discover at the same time that there is a totem pole of racial intelligence, and you're going to go, holy, what? You keep asking it, it's like, this is reality. You're like, oh my, do I just stop trying? What is this? Holy crap, that's a really big deal. It could really bum you out. Now, inevitably, when you guys get in the comments and ask me questions about race and intelligence, here is my view in perpetuity until politics changes in at least the United States. This is my view as applied forward for the rest of this channel's lifetime until and unless politics really changes. Here it is. Ready?
Okay. So he prefaced this by saying, this people say it's 2 years ago. This is his view from now until basically the end of time, until politics has changed. What does that mean? I don't know. I do not know. But we can assume that he still holds whatever view that he's going to say right now to the current day until or unless something different has been said. Let's see what he says.
I 100% acknowledge, because I'm literate, that race is truly a biological construct. It is deep. It pervades almost everything, and it has real-world differences in ability that are complicated. They are overlapping in spectra, but they are nonetheless for sure real. And
you are not exaggerating. This is race realism. He is doing race realism. He's a race realist. That is kind of crazy. That is crazy. I want him to describe what he means by these differences. Like, oh, black people can run faster, white people are smarter. Like, what are we talking about here? What are these characteristics that are biological, right?
they affect every single thing about your life on the margins. If you ask me any more questions about that, I won't say anything because I'm not getting canceled over that shit.
He ain't get canceled over this. He got canceled over something else, to be fair. To be fair, this wasn't what got him canceled. It wasn't this. Anyway, there is... Hold on. I have to go. I'll show you this section first. Because I think it's funny.
Talking about? Okay, what is his PhD in? I'm genuinely curious. PhD in racism. His PhD is in kinesiology and physiology. Okay, that doesn't make him a like expert on like determining like racial differences.
So apparently, your Mike Mike Israetel has been undeniable. Congrats. I don't take solace in being right all the time, just half the time. Apparently, even his PhD is not completely the full story. So there's this video from Solomon Nelson Mike Israetel's PhD the biggest academic sham in fitness? So let's see what this is about.
Then there are people who shout so loudly about how brilliant they are, you start to wonder what they're trying to drown out.
You've never met anyone with as much willpower as me. And whatever it is you think you're good at in your life, I'd probably take about a year and become an authority in the field in which you think you're good. I'm both on a raw IQ scale smarter than almost every coach, maybe every coach. And I know more about physiology, body responses, etc. than they do. You are presuming you know more than me about the thing I'm one of the top experts in the world in, and also the thing I'm literally involved in myself. So whatever ideas you have about how I can improve, just right off. There's a very high probability that I'm much better at making fun of people than you are.
So naturally, when I got my hands on Mike Israetel's PhD thesis, I expected a masterwork, an intellectual tour de force. Instead,
I am a perfectionist asshole with a PhD. Yeah, hell yeah, that's why I say shit like that.
Dr. Mike, geez, that's a big deal. And I've noticed that carries a lot of weight. Like all I feel is rage and frustration.
what I got was a document so sloppy, shallow, and confused, it could only pass in a system that had already failed.
Interesting.
Other JD students at Melbourne Law School use their database access to read case law. I used mine to download Mike Israetel's PhD thesis, which I read in its entirety. But
That's so petty, but I respect it. Maybe he was doing it out of a genuine adoration for Dr. Mike and was like, you know what? I want to see what the hype is about. I want to see his words right from the source. I doubt it, honestly. Like, I think he's just like, bro, this guy is a fraud, but let me find his thesis to prove myself correct. And he did exactly that, which I gotta respect, you know.
For those unfamiliar, Mike Israetel is a prominent figure in the fitness world. He's a competitive bodybuilder, a highly successful YouTuber, and the creator of the popular Exercise Scientist Critique series. Mike frequently highlights his status as a PhD holder across all his platforms, from his Instagram handle to dozens of YouTube videos.
Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength.
His company website and advertised products.
As a guy certified hater,
But
he
what
has
about
many
the
videos hitting on
academic-
fake Dr. Mike. Oh no, I assumed that was the case. That was my assumption, right? I don't think he was actually like a fan who was like, let me just see his word for his source. Because the fans usually, right, just take his words at face value, which there are people who've done that here, right? Whenever Dr. Mike comes up, or even like in the Sans chat, they're like, oh, well, he knows his stuff. You know, he has a PhD. There's never any interrogation about whether the PhD is actually accurate or real or, you know, based on any like true standing, right? It's faith in the institution itself. It's like, because he has the PhD, they are putting faith in the fact that like he must have done the accurate, rigorous, you know, steps to actually get the PhD. Therefore, his words must be based in, you know, scientific literature and value. You feel me? Wait, is this in the video? Stop spoiling the video, chat. If he's gonna get to it, relax. We're gonna get to it. Take us on a journey.
Of the PhD itself. In this video,
I think
we'll
that's from
examine
YouTube drama.
just
No,
that.
that is literally this guy. It's quite literally the guy. It's this guy in the screenshot who's reading Dr. Mike's words. I promise you, it's most likely inside of the video.
I'll conduct a critical analysis of the doctoral research that forms the basis of Mike's credibility as an exercise scientist. In Chapter 2 of this video, I'll provide an overview of Mike's thesis. Chapter 3 will then outline the standard assessment criteria for PhD theses. Building on this, Chapter 4 presents my core argument that by these standard academic criteria, Mike's PhD thesis would likely fail, or at the very least be sent back for major revisions at any high-ranking university. Chapter 5 outlines why this finding matters.
You
And I
posted this
conclude in
video. They're
chapter
really on
6
him this week. And to be fair, that's just how it works. Like, it's like pirate software, right? When people just don't like you, once they find a reason to actually not like you, everybody who doesn't like you for different reasons will jump on the train to hate on you, right? Which is why you'll see like this guy, Greg Duchette, making 4 videos about Mike Israetel for that exact reason, right? Not saying he doesn't deserve it, but I'm just saying like that's not unique, you know. The way he put Auschwitz quotes in his thesis, that sounds like the most Mike Israetel thing that he's done. For being entirely real.
by tying the threads together. I'll show how Mike's PhD thesis, far from bolstering his credibility, actually destroys it.
Gasp. This is hitting with a purpose, the best kind.
Mike is
Hey, listen, if it I don't want to say that I pray for people's careers to be destroyed, right? Because I don't necessarily take solace in people's careers being destroyed. However, when it's a race realist, white supremacist, whose, you know, only positive thoughts about black people come from, you know, talking about how good they are at flowing in rapping, then like, hey, you take it where you can get it. Tori a la mode, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Much appreciated. You didn't have to do it, but I appreciate you gifting subs to me. Keeping us in business over here at the Shaun the Black Studios. That's right. I'm launching my new studio, Shaun the Black Studios, where we make only Dr. Mike Israetel videos.
Israetel's PhD thesis, titled The Interrelationships of Fitness Characteristics in Division I Athletes, investigates how various fitness traits, including strength, rate of force development, power, vertical jump height, short distance sprinting speed, and body composition, relate to one another in Division I collegiate athletes.
Okay.
The overarching aim
That
is
does
to
sound very thesis-like. Theses are just like, pick the most niche topic you know of and make it even more niche, and you have a thesis written about that. You know?
to explore the extent to which athletic performance can be understood as the summation of these interrelated physical attributes. 80 NCAA Division I athletes from 4 sports, baseball, women's volleyball, men's soccer, and women's soccer, participated in a longitudinal athlete monitoring program at East Tennessee State University. They underwent assessments of maximal strength, rate of force development, power output, vertical jump height, short distance sprinting speed, and body composition. Statistical analyses examined correlations among these measures, as well as differences between high and low performing subgroups. The results demonstrated that 1. Strength strongly correlates with muscularity. 2. Athletes with higher relative force and power output demonstrate superior jumping and sprinting ability. And 3. Leaner athletes outperform less lean athletes in nearly all metrics, especially relative strength, power, vertical jumping, and sprinting. Perhaps unsurprisingly, these results largely aligned with conventional sports science assumptions.
Do we think that he got away with such bad research that I assume that Solomon's going to get into because it aligned with what conventional science was already saying? And so theoretically his thesis was supposed to back up and show correlations between what conventional science is saying, but instead the thesis was informed by was informed by conventional science already and didn't actually prove anything because it was working backwards, you know? The thesis was just stating the opposite. Less the thesis was stating the opposite, because theses that solidify already thought conclusions are useful, and more that the thesis was informed by conventional science as opposed to supporting it, right? And so the way that he structured the research was that he looked for the conclusions in the research itself instead of doing the research to try to prove the conclusions. You know what I mean? I'm just guessing. He's going to get into it, but I'm just wondering, like, what... Because nothing he said so far jumps out as, like, being inherently wrong and incorrect. So it must be, like, the methodology that he did that like causes it to be invalid. Depends, there are real problems where thesis defense rarely fail, and it's more of an exercise in persistence and withstanding a growing debt than a display of novel discovery. I mean, sure, one day I'll get my PhD in race realist studies or something. I don't know.
Leaner, stronger, and more muscular athletes tend to perform better in key physical domains. In his conclusion, Mike summarizes his findings, which basically just reinforce existing wisdom about athletic performance. Mike suggests how future research could explore how fitness priorities might vary across skill levels, but offers little in the way of specific methodological approaches or clearly defined unanswered questions. In short, Mike's thesis consolidates the widely held view in sports science that it's a good idea for aspiring athletes to become leaner, stronger, and more muscular.
Gasp. Because again, I guess it's not inherently a bad thing for a thesis to state, but like, I can see how people don't view that as very hard hitting.
Before we critically examine Mike's thesis, we need
It's like doing a
objective
thesis on the sky being blue, which I'm sure somebody has done.
criteria to assess it by. Although the core expectations and assessment criteria for a PhD thesis are remarkably consistent globally, my alma mater, Melbourne University, can serve as a guide. To be awarded a pass, a doctoral thesis must A. Demonstrate authority in the candidate's field and show evidence of command of knowledge in relevant fields. So you have to inspire trust in the reader. The reader should get the impression that you're a reliable investigator in the field. You're an equal among peers.
See Van Joe as a project using Dead Babies as a punchline?
B.
No, I did not see him also use Dead Babies as a punchline either. You've broken two different things in my brain.
Demonstrate a thorough grasp of the methodological techniques appropriate to the research question and an awareness of their limitations. So it's not enough just to choose a methodology. You have to persuade the reader that you chose it for a good reason. C. Make a contribution to knowledge that rests on originality of approach and/or interpretation of the findings, and in some cases, the discovery of new facts. So you have to offer a genuinely new contribution that meaningfully advances your field. You can't just replicate or tweak past work. D. Demonstrate the candidate's ability to communicate research findings effectively. So you can't bury your findings in jargon or submit something that reads like an unedited draft. Your thesis has to be clearly written, professionally presented, and free from basic mistakes, whether in language, formatting, or data handling. E. Demonstrate an understanding of and commitment to research ethics and integrity.
Seems like an issue
So
with
all
the
that really
doctoral
just
committee
means
so
that you
far. I'm
have to
currently working on
conduct-
monetization, and even within my program, there's so much variation and rigor across students and chairs. Does this seem to meet the standard of contributing to literature? No. Whose fault is that? The committee's? Sure. I don't disagree with it.
Conduct your research responsibly, and that means just being transparent, getting explicit consent from any participants, etc. And F. Be a careful, rigorous, and sustained piece of work, demonstrating that
Does
a
you replicate to
research
confirm the
apprenticeship
research?
is complete and the holder may be admitted to the community of
It
scholars.
depends. Like, I don't think you can just, like, if 50 people in a line just all, confirm the research by replicating that in their thesis, it's not very useful. Right? So there is some, there's some leeway or variability when it comes to what standards are applied and what occurs, but you do have to try to bring something new to the field. The answer of why did you write this in the first place can't just be because everybody else did it.
Scholars in the discipline. So you can't just stitch together a few chapters and call it a thesis. The whole thing needs to be coherent, meticulously edited, internally consistent, and attentive to detail, which includes, of course, how your data are presented, interpreted, and integrated across chapters.
Why Mike Israetel's PhD thesis would likely fail or at least be sent back for major revisions at any high-ranking university.
In this
Kind of reminds me of
chapter,
the dude who supposedly overcame for being on all the gear. Was his name Scott? I don't remember. His name started with S as well, I think. Unless it didn't, in which case I'm wrong.
I'll argue that, according to standard assessment criteria, Mike's thesis would have failed, or at the very least been sent back for major revisions at any high-ranking university.
Okay. Well, here's a 4.1. Why do we have sub-chapters in the midst of the chapters? Okay. All right. Bro is a full nerd.
Mike's thesis falls short of fulfilling one of the most fundamental requirements for doctoral research, a significant contribution of original knowledge. The stated goal of Mike's thesis was to explore interrelationships among fitness variables that he claimed were less clear in the existing literature.
Okay.
However, the core findings, that stronger athletes are more muscular and powerful, that more powerful athletes jump higher and sprint faster, and that leaner athletes perform better in these tasks.
Apparently, they're saying the PhD that Solomon reviewed was a draft. I don't know how they would be published, though. I can start spoiling. No spoilers. Why is your name spelled wrong? What do you mean?
Unsurprising, but also extensively documented in prior research, even by 2013. You don't have to take it from me. Just listen to Mike himself, who openly concedes this throughout the document. For instance, in Chapter 3, Mike explicitly notes that the finding that stronger athletes produce higher rates of force development has been previously well supported in the literature, and that the finding of higher power generating abilities being associated with stronger athletes is well supported by previous data.
Okay.
On the following page, he acknowledges that stronger athletes, especially relative to their body mass, tend to jump higher and sprint faster, and that his findings merely show trends in this direction.
Okay.
He repeats this theme in Chapter 4, when he affirms that his results concord with much of the other research on the relationships between power, body composition, and athletic performance. By Chapter 5, the pattern is unmistakable. The abstract reiterates that athletes with higher lean body mass and lower body fat are stronger, more powerful.
But could he not use this information to draw a new conclusion that hasn't been drawn before? I guess maybe not. Or why didn't he just do that? Right? Instead of being like, yeah, this has all been said before, though, but like, all my research just confirms that.
Powerful and faster, reinforcing the importance of body composition.
It would be a
A point
meta-analysis.
that has been reinforced in many previous publications. Pages 97 through 98 continue this line, noting that the observed correlations concord well with existing literature. In the final
Yes, if
summary,
one of the theses
Mike
you find some new
concludes
angle where the
that
research is
relative
lacking.
strength is a better predictor of performance than absolute strength, based both on the findings of previous
All right, I have a lot
literature
of freaking nerd chatters in here. I'm just a small baby bachelor's degree holder.
and this investigation. Nearly every major result is explicitly framed as a confirmation of prior research, rather than a departure from it. To be clear, replication is a valuable part of scientific practice. Confirmatory studies can reinforce confidence in previous findings, especially when using diverse populations or refined measurement tools.
Oh no!
But a PhD
Don't say the word diverse to Dr. Mike Israel, please. You're gonna get him started. I would rather him write this thesis as opposed to talking about how this would apply to diverse sets of people. If I'm being entirely here's majestic, thank you. It's a little bit all over the place, but it's in the works.
thesis isn't just a scientific study. It's a scholarly work held to a higher standard. It's supposed to demonstrate that the candidate can contribute new knowledge to his or her field, not just affirm what's already well accepted. By
He's gonna
that
write a thesis on
criterion,
Mike, isn't he? I mean, this basically is that. He has subheader 4.1. Like,
Mike's dissertation doesn't qualify. Mike's thesis proposes no new theories, investigates no novel mechanisms nor methods, and makes no methodological innovations. It's a largely descriptive work that fails to advance the conceptual boundaries of sports science in any meaningful way.
But have you considered that he put a lot of money behind the getting of the degree? So, hashtag no child left behind.
Another way Mike's thesis could be said to lack originality is its dearth of independence in thought and approach. While it is expected that a PhD candidate will ground his or her work in existing literature, Mike's thesis rarely moves beyond mere reiteration. As I'll detail later, the literature review in Mike's thesis is uncritical. It's just an inventory of past findings rather than an evaluative synthesis. And that kind of passive engagement with sources continues throughout the thesis. Mike's research questions are framed in terms of small, population-specific gaps, without articulating why these gaps matter or whether existing models should be expected to fail in the context of Division I athletes. Merely noting the absence of data isn't on its own a meaningful justification for research. A legitimate research gap demands a theoretical reason to believe that something
thesis reviewers, how
unexpected...
did this pass? I mean, to be fair, there are other people who passed in the same, maybe not the same like school or institution, but like for the same rigor, you know? It's like when you let standards slightly slip in like your schooling, and you have people who like can barely read themselves becoming teachers, and they're teaching based on their lack of knowledge, it kind of becomes like a cyclical cycle. So like, it's not even necessarily like Dr. Mike's fault himself, but it's instead like a fault of like the culture of, you know, getting a PhD is becoming more like checking a box as opposed to actually meaningfully adding something new to the industry, right, or field of study that you're in. For the stats too, percentage of successful PhDs, yeah. It's kind of like GPA. Like GPA is a inherently flawed metric because your GPA is purely tied to what school you go to. And if the school wants to appear better on you know, different metrics, they'll just bump people's GPA up. You feel me? They'll just like you have some schools who will grade on a scale so that their GPAs are not as low as like other schools are. And so like you'll have somebody who has a 4.0 GPA who will then go to a school with other people who have 4.0 GPAs, but their GPAs are just weighted differently, so that different 4.0 mean different things in different schools because they're only the only standard is standardized through school districts maybe, and not like a national standard for like what curriculum means. You know what I mean? And then you have like homeschooled kids, and that's like a whole separate thing.
Different or revelatory might be found. Who knows? Perhaps even something...
Some of my professors on student selection committees talk about how much variation across schools. Yeah, that's just how it is. PhD title matters, but also what kind of journals you're getting published in. If you ever cited matters too. Not all PhDs are made the same. And I don't think Dr. Mike got published in anything crazy. Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily matter in like colloquial forms of like being taken seriously in authority, right? Like if you were to go and become a professor in like sports science or actually hold a meaningful position, then that would matter. But if you're making a YouTube channel and for the authority you say or introduce yourself as Dr. Mike Israetel, that means something as well, right? Because you're seen as an authority on a topic. Like I can count the number of times that I can't count the number of times that people came in here and was talking about Dr. Mike and are like, he has a PhD in this or that, right? That's his like his calling card. That's what he's is seen as like authoritative because of. That's just it. Yeah, I'll be right back. Mirby.
Counter-expected, to borrow from Mike's idiolect. This is something Mike's thesis never provides. Mike's lack of independence in thought and approach is evident in the methodology as well. All performance tests, analytical techniques, and interpretative frameworks appear to be taken directly from existing literature, most often from Mike's supervisor, Mike Stone, and close colleagues, without exploration of alternatives or acknowledgement of limitations. The thesis doesn't test new models, question prevailing assumptions, nor integrate competing viewpoints. The lack of originality in the thesis is therefore not surprising. It's the predictable result of a research process that never stepped outside its own circle to ask new questions. A doctoral thesis isn't evaluated just on the originality or significance of its content, but also the clarity and accuracy with which that content is presented. Mike Israetel's thesis fails comprehensively on this front. Across the thesis, Mike presents impossible and contradictory data, inflates simple points with jargon, and allows hundreds of basic grammatical, typographical, and formatting errors to remain uncorrected. The following sections unpack these issues in detail, and by the end, you'll see that it's impossible to view Mike's work as anything but fundamentally compromised.
I was about to go get the Henny.
Some of the data Mike presents in the extreme group comparison tables are statistically impossible. On page 77, Mike acknowledges the large standard deviations in tables 4.6 and 4.7. But how large are we talking? Well, let's examine.
Bro, he did 4.2.1. Stop. I'm like telling you for the 10 gifted subs. Thank you, much appreciated. You must hate Dr. Mike Israetel. And you're in good company. Hold on, what did I miss?
Questions. In literature. Thing counter-expected, to borrow found. Who knows, perhaps even something counter-expected. No methodological innovations. It's a largely descriptive work that fails to advance the conceptual boundaries of sports science in any meaningful way. Another way Mike's thesis could be said to lack originality is its dearth of independence in thought and approach. While it is expected that a PhD candidate will ground his or her work in existing literature, Mike's thesis rarely moves beyond mere reiteration. As I'll detail later, the literature review in Mike's thesis is uncritical. It's just an inventory of past findings rather than an...
I will also say, this is something that you are taught in bachelor's programs, right? Like how to do a literature review is something that is taught, and I know because I took the class on English 101. Right? You are taught that. To be fair, if there are no standards in what is taught in, standard English classes, like basic English classes, and it's not enforced all the way up, what does it matter?
An evaluative synthesis. And that kind of passive engagement with sources continues throughout the thesis. Mike's research questions are framed in terms of small, population-specific gaps, without articulating why these gaps matter or whether existing models should be expected to fail in the context of Division I athletes. Merely noting the absence of data isn't on its own a meaningful justification for research. A legitimate research gap demands a theoretical reason to believe that something unexpected, different, or revelatory might be found. Who knows, perhaps even something counter-expected, to borrow from Mike's idiolect. This is something Mike's thesis never provides. Mike's lack of independence in thought and approach is evident in the methodology as well. All performance tests, analytical techniques, and interpretative frameworks appear to be...
Okay, my question would be, did he seek out to answer a question? Right, because that's what most research is about, by and large. Right? Even if your goal is to enforce or reinforce, right, prior preconceived notions and prior research, right, there's still a question you have to ask. Like, why did you feel like this research needed to be corroborated? Did you feel like there was a gap in the research that you felt you needed to fill? Right? So like what question did you or were you seeking to answer by doing the research in the first place? And from what is being described in this video, it feels like he kind of did it to like just do it. No, he was like, oh, it would be cool for me to get a PhD. Let me just get a PhD. It wasn't like, hey, there's this. I've been in this field for, 5, 8, 10 years. I have a question about this one thing. Let me go out of my way to try to find out what my answer is to this question, right? Or why are things the way they are because of this? And it doesn't feel like he has that been demonstrated in this video, at least. Like, I haven't read a thesis. I'm not gonna lie. Sit here and did. I have a hypothesis and a thesis yet. I have no advanced degree, and my background is just a bachelor's in science and biochem. We still present a much rigorous thesis for our degree. So it covers all these bases. Other than obvious, there's no requirement for novel observation. Ooh, geez Louise. I always put this is a statement of thesis on my essays. His question was, why does stronger and leaner make you a good athlete? Which kind of answers itself.
Taken directly from existing literature.
I mean, I guess, but like, there's nothing wrong with asking that question if you have a purpose for doing so, right? One has to ask, like, as a person who asked that question, you have to then ask, why did I ask that question, right? Why did I feel the need to corroborate why being stronger and leaner makes you a better athlete, right? Because you could literally Google that and find a plethora of other research, which he does for his thesis to answer that question, right? Which is why that's not a great justification for like, this is why I need to write my own thesis about this, because that can be answered, right? If you do your own research and you find previous research that does answer the question but not adequately, then you can then be like, okay, I can, more adequately answer this question in this way, as opposed to just being like, I think it'll be cool to find or to know this thing. But you're always wants a why it's important section. Where's the contribution?
Yeah.
How many freaking doctoral students? How many freaking what's it called? Advanced degree pursuers do we have in here?
Often from Mike's supervisor, Mike Stone, and close colleagues, without exploration of alternatives or acknowledgement of limitations. The thesis doesn't test new models, question prevailing assumptions, nor integrate competing viewpoints. The lack of originality in the thesis is therefore not surprising.
Data contradicts the original thesis. It takes maturity and willingness to put aside the ego to pursue that alternative. But the problem is that it literally didn't do that. The data was just exactly as expected. So there was nothing new gained by there being another thesis, right, from Mike Israetel in the world. The data literally stated that like being stronger makes you a more well-rounded athlete. You know what I mean?
Predictable result of a research process that never stepped outside its own circle to ask new questions. A doctoral thesis isn't evaluated just on the originality or significance of its content, but also the clarity and accuracy with which that content is presented. Mike Israetel's thesis fails comprehensively on this front. Across the thesis, Mike presents impossible and contradictory data, inflates simple points with jargon, and allows hundreds of basic grammatical, typographical, and form...
One athletes.
formatting errors to remain uncorrected.
Okay, that would have not passed freaking English 101. Like,
Marcelo6059 gifted a tier 1 sub to Morbid 400.
Sections unpack these issues in detail.
did y'all not have English professors that would like mark off 1 point for every single grammatical error? And so if you had 100 grammatical errors, you would have basically get a 0. Yes, yeah, okay, that wasn't just me. Marcelo, thank you for the gifted sub. Much appreciated. No? Oh, okay, maybe it was just me. I had a Nightmare professor that did that for my lab reports. It was Nightmare, especially citation errors. Okay, so it was okay. It was a thing that some professors did. Just in my country don't do grades like that. Oh, you'd be surprised. Max off for mechanics was 25%. Probably. I never lost 100 points. I assumed that it would get down to 0 if it got that bad, you know? But you learned a lesson. You learned the lesson. Like he didn't even spell check. I can't even look at a Word document without fixing every single spelling error. Because if I see the red underline, it makes me cry. I either have to fix the spelling error or I have to add the word to my dictionary or ignore it. Because I cannot look at a paper without with the red squiggle underneath the words.
We'll see that it's impossible to view Mike's work as anything but fundamentally compromised.
Didn't he used to always have that?
Some of the data Mike presents in...
I mean, in 2013 they did, right? And his paper was made in 2013, or his thesis was written in 2013. So they did at least have spell check in 2013. I know because I was in school at that time. You know? You should have write non-white names, yeah.
In the extreme group comparison tables are statistically impossible. On page 77, Mike acknowledges the large standard deviations in tables 4.6 and 4.7. But how large are we talking? Well, let's examine. I'll put on screen tables 4.6 and 4.7, which are on page 71. They compare the top 20 and bottom 20 jumpers. Tables 4.6 and 4.7 report that for the 20 lowest performers, the mean body masses were 73.9 kilos and 75.3 kilos respectively, with standard deviations of 71.8 kilos, virtually equal to the means themselves. This is a statistical absurdity. Standard deviation
it's possible, you don't know.
Data around the mean. A standard deviation this large, relative to the mean, is nonsensical in a biological context. For this to be true, given a normal distribution, it would mean that roughly 1/3 of the lowest performing athletes in table 4.6 had a body mass either greater than 145.7 kilos or less than 2.1 kilos, the weight of a newborn. And since we know that this group consists of 20 Division I college athletes, this is impossible, but it gets even worse. In table 4.6, 1/3 of the lowest performers was either older than age 41.2 or younger than -1.6. So they hadn't even been born. In table 4.7, 1/3 was either older than age 41.1 or younger than -1.3. Mike does this again on page 94 in table 5.
Could it just be that he just doesn't necessarily know how to calculate standard deviation? Right? Because not really... I mean, I guess for the highest performers, the standard deviation for the age sounds relatively normal, right? But it just... Maybe he just... Yeah, because this is equal to this. I think maybe his table got messed up and he didn't triple check it, but all of these standard deviations are equal to the means of the highest performers, right? And so I think it's genuinely a formatting error, or his table copy and pasted incorrectly or something like that. And he just didn't, nobody checked it at all. Right? He didn't check it. His editors didn't check it. His committee didn't check it. They were just all like, okay, that makes sense to me. Doing more on his thesis than he did.
As with tables 4.6 and 4.7, the standard deviations for the lowest performers are impossible. Here, 1/3 of the lowest performers was either taller than 3.459 meters, taller than any human ever recorded, or shorter than -6.1 centimeters. As to age, either they were older than 40.4 years of age, or younger than -1.4 years.
I genuinely think, and
Once
this
again,
is to give him a little bit of credit, like maybe he does know how to calculate standard deviation. I think he just he just didn't care, right? Enough to like read over his research to make sure everything lined up to be correct. He could still also not know how to calculate standard deviation, but like it genuinely feels like a formatting error.
that they hadn't yet been born. No wonder they were such low performers. These are numbers so fundamentally wrong that they could only result from incompetent data entry, which is exactly what's happened here. Mike appears to have simply copied the mean figures of the highest performers and pasted them as the standard deviations of the...
Exactly. Okay. All right. That answers the question. See how like he figured it out and we figured it out within 10 seconds of what or looking at this chart, or sorry, the table. Did Mike just not do a second read over what he put in the paper, like his thesis? Like,
the lowest
I
performers.
feel like we just earned our PhD. I mean, we're right there.
To have made this mistake just once would be damning enough. But Mike makes this exact same error
Stop.
in 3 separate tables.
Stop. You have to be joking. I'm starting to doubt that he wrote this at all, actually. Like, cause you... Okay, maybe he was given the data incorrectly. Maybe. TNC Child, thank you for this. He's been so sus. Oh, I've been on this train for months, chat. I was ready to use PhD when the AI come out. It was in 2013. And so there was no ChatGPT 3 or 4. But like, I don't know. There are still other ways to be incompetent with writing papers. Trust. What does that sound? Oh. The fidget spinner.
These mistakes invalidate the entire tables and any conclusions drawn from them.
This is true. Like, because we have no way of knowing the real data. So we have no idea, no way of knowing. Because if the data is incorrect, you can't draw any conclusions from the data, which means, like, these sections of the paper that support and prove the thesis that he makes, no matter what the thesis is meaningless. Because it can't support anything because the data is fake. No, it's not fake, it's incorrect.
This doesn't count as ineffective communication of research findings, then nothing does.
That okay, genuinely, this would be enough, in my personal opinion, to get the thesis like denied, like, or sent back for revisions. You know what I mean? Like, it's just incorrect. It's fundamentally incorrect.
Further incompetence can be seen in Mike's handling of percent differences. Take table 5.5, where the majority of percent differences reported is negative. However, Mike omits the minus sign altogether in figures 5.1 and 5.2, as well as in the text on page 96. For example, he writes of an 8% difference without clarifying that the value in question was actually negative 8.71% according to table 5.5. And Mike's rounding is also both
which would
imprecise.
technically, I guess, still technically be correct, if not misleading. Right? So it would be just incorrect for being misleading as opposed to incorrect for being like factually wrong. It is still technically an 8% difference. But it is misleading.
And inconsistent. Starting with imprecision, percent differences of negative 8.71% and negative 7.91% are both inexplicably rounded up to 8%.
Okay, that's kind of funny.
As to inconsistency, a smaller difference of 2.42% is rounded more precisely to 2.4%.
Without a space, by the way.
All of the other percent differences are rounded to whole numbers. Mike gives no explanation for these discrepancies. And this sloppiness with the handling of percent differences crops up not just in Chapter 5, but also Chapters 3 and 4. This leads one to have rather little confidence in the care that was taken to present the results faithfully.
Yeah, so far this is probably the worst section that he has in the thesis. Like, it's just...
I want to highlight a finding in table 4.
And 244.
4. That flatly contradicts one of the central premises of Mike's thesis, which is that jump height correlates...
What was the thesis, defense of the thesis like? Who was even on that panel? I don't even know if they read it. You know what I mean? I don't even know if they read it.
With sprint speed.
Can you run down this weird Dr. Mike Israel guy? I don't know if he thinks here and there. Dr. Mike Israel is this dude, bro, bodybuilder, exercise science guy who does weightlifting and other content. He is a race realist, so he's racist. Hold on, I want to show you one of my favorite ones. This is it.
A lot of the most racist white people aren't so proud of being white. Like, dude, you're the worst at all the things white people are supposed to be good at. I get it. While whiteness is the only thing you have, like, you suck. It's like a 5'2" unathletic black dude who can't flow or talk or rap or dance and definitely can't play ball, being like, yo, blacks are superior to everyone. You're like, yeah, I agree largely, but they missed you, didn't they, pimp? Every time I meet a racist white person, I'm just like, I get it. I get that's the only thing you have left to hold on to. It's sad. If someone's really upstanding version of their race and they're racist, you're like, whoa, that hits. But I've yet to meet anybody like that. A lot of the most racist.
Yeah. You guys think it's so good? What white people are supposed to be good at? He doesn't say. For some reason, he doesn't say what white people are supposed to be good at. But he does say what black people are supposed to be good at, and that is flowing, dancing, rapping, playing ball. You know? Yeah, that's the guy we're talking about. Is he writing doctoral theses? Apparently not.
4.4.
I'm the worst black. Stop.
A strong negative correlation, negative 0.617, between jump height and 20-meter sprint time, as expected. But for the male athletes, the reported correlation is positive, 0.653, suggesting, bizarrely, that higher jumpers were actually slower sprinters. Now, Mike never acknowledges nor explains this contradiction. Most likely it's just a typo, a missing minus sign. On its own, it wouldn't be damning. But given the context of the other glaring data errors, as well as many other basic mistakes that I'll detail later, it becomes part of a much larger pattern of negligence. When your tables repeatedly include sprinters who haven't been born yet, athletes shorter than 0 centimeters...
Hey,
and
you don't know sperms be swimming, though, so think about that.
Standard deviations that imply body masses smaller than a house cat or larger than an offensive lineman riding another offensive lineman, it's no longer just sloppy. It's disqualifying. Throughout Mike's thesis, simple ideas are inflated with verbose, pseudo-technical language. This habit appears as early as the first page of the introductory chapter. Let's look at this equation. Skill 1 plus skill 2 plus skill 3 plus ellipsis plus skill n equals athletic performance magnitude. Mike asserts that skills sum to generate athletic performance. But why do they sum and not multiply or interact in complex ways? Mike doesn't say.
My ideal day, I would go down into my basement.
Sorry, I got distracted.
Equals athletic performance magnitude. Mike asserts that skills sum to generate athletic performance. But why do they sum and not multiply?
Why do they sum? Like, gym math is like your sprint speed plus your jump speed plus your, I don't know, your squat speed equals how athletic you are.
Interact in complex ways. Mike doesn't say.
My ideal
Adding
day,
is easier.
I would
Probably, but what does that solve? You know, what does that? How does that correlate? You feel me?
go down into my basement office and do deep work, equations, systematizing things.
This equation is presented twice in the thesis without any justification. And worse, this is just a convoluted way of saying what Mike later admits on page 103. Sport performance depends on the athlete's ability to execute a combination of skills. Why
Like,
not
that's
just-
true. But if you're going to write a thesis about... See, that would be a way more interesting thesis, honestly. Like, genuinely, that would be a way more interesting thesis as opposed to a thesis that just backs up claims that we already know. Is writing a thesis about finding out what that equation would be to be the culmination of a athlete's, like, skill. Right? Taking into account things like their body fat percentage and their sprint speed and their jump speed. Right? How would those different stats culminate together into... But that sounds hard, bro. That's true. But how would that culminate into, like, you know, determining who is a better athlete on a very, like, general basis? Like, what would that equation look like? So that equation can then be used and referenced in future studies, right? To then corroborate or disprove other studies that came before it. You know?
State that from the outset in clear language. The same can also be said of the other equation, fitness characteristics component plus technique components plus psychological component equals total skill magnitude.
There would be tweaked for every sport, not every skill is equally important in every sport. And that's what you would say in the thesis, right? And because the thesis, for the thesis, you don't have to say, this is what the equation is, therefore we've solved the world or whatever, right? You could also say, you know, there is not an equation that exists as a culmination of all the sums of a athlete's, you know, skill level. Here's one that would apply for, you know, track and relay and sprinting, but it does not apply for all different, you know, just draw some conclusion, right? That adds something to the field and gives other people in the field something to build off of. You know?
Though there are bigger problems with this equation that I'll get into later, for now let me draw your attention to how on page 33, Mike labels fitness characteristics, technique, and psychology as theoretical variables. Mike attempts to justify this by stating, these variables are theoretical because pure measurement of almost all of them is impossible, short of a few fitness characteristics such as body mass and percent fat.
Well, okay, so
But
if they're
this is irrelevant
theoretical,
to
how do you put them in an equation? You know? You can't do algebra for things that are just theoretical. Why even have an equation? And how can you get any numbers from the equation if it's purely theoretical?
Mike's thesis. Had Mike just removed the word theoretical, which adds nothing anyway, he would have spared the reader this pointless philosophical digression. Mike's tendency to overcomplicate sometimes backfires. Consider page 14, where Mike defines fitness characteristics as theoretical constructs that obviate the input of any sport-specific technique or psychological variables. Not only is this phrasing clumsy, obviate the input is nonsensical in this context. To obviate means to make unnecessary, or to avoid, or prevent, but Mike misuses it here to mean something like exclude consideration of. What he's trying to say is simple. Fitness characteristics are physical traits like strength and speed, independent of technique or mindset. But instead of stating that clearly, Mike buries it in pretentious sludge. This tendency to dress up the mundane reaches absurdity in Chapter 3, where Mike argues that allometrically scaled peak force is a superior predictor of performance to relative strength. But in his own tables, on pages 43, 66, and 91, he reports allometrically scaled peak force in newtons per kilogram, which is, by definition, a measure of relative strength. It's just the force an athlete produces divided by his or her body mass. True allometric scaling requires adjusting for nonlinear size relationships using an exponent, for example, mass to the power of 0.5, which Mike never does.
Yeah, Nerd stuff, I'll take his word for it.
So Mike has taken a basic calculation, relative strength, mislabeled it with a more complex and scientific sounding term, allometric scaling, and then claimed its superiority over the very thing it actually is. It's as if he poured water.
Honestly,
into a
the
fancy
funniest
bottle,
part about this
called it
is
hydroosmotic.
right. The funniest part about this is that you could write an entire thesis about why allometric peak scaling is a better term to use than relative strength. Like that could be your thesis, right? About why that term is superior in its usage to this other term and how it invalidates or at least diminishes the resulting papers and research from other researchers because of their usage of that term. You could legitimately write a thesis about that. But he was just like, no, actually my word is better than this word, and no, I will not, and no, I will not be explaining. And he just moves on. Which, you know what? Fair, I guess.
And then claimed it's better than regular water. But in trying to sound more sophisticated, Mike inadvertently reveals
Sorry, Jean.
better than regular water bottle, called it hydroosmotic elixir. It's as if he and then claimed its superiority over the very thing it actually is. It's as if he poured water into a fancy bottle, called it hydroosmotic elixir, and then claimed it's better than regular water. But in trying to sound more sophisticated, Mike inadvertently reveals a lack of understanding, both of the concepts involved and how to convey them clearly.
Say only what needs to be said, because wordiness can impede the ready grasp of ideas. So advises page 67 of the APA 6 publication manual, a resource Mike clearly should have followed much more closely, as the next section will make all too evident.
Oh gosh. Jeez Louise. Do you think that's what his fitness
like to
supplements
nitpick
are?
the odd
Chill.
typo.
Honestly, I read a thesis about that too, about how fitness supplements oftentimes use or weaponizes like academic sounding language in order to, you know, market itself to people who care about fitness. I read that thesis as well. But that is also an interesting premise. He chose the most boring premise. He was just like, if you can jump farther and run faster and lift more, you are a good athlete. And that's the extent of his premise that he researched on in his thesis. I'm just like, that's like literally the most boring thing you could pick. That's it, basically. In D1 athletes, right? In D1 athletes, the people who can run farther, jump farther and higher, and who can, you know, pull or push more weight are more well-rounded athletes. Or people who are also leaner are more well-rounded as well. It's just about like what characteristics make a more well-rounded athlete as a whole.
Or formatting inconsistency. I acknowledge that minor errors are hard to avoid in any long document. But Mike Israetel's thesis doesn't just have a few scattered mistakes. It contains literally hundreds of basic grammatical, typographical, and formatting errors. I won't cover all of them here, since it would simply take too long. We can save it for a later video. But even a brief overview is enough to show that this isn't a matter of being overly critical. No reasonable standard of academic quality could justify a thesis this riddled with elementary errors. It speaks to a total lack of editorial care at every level, from the writer, Mike Israetel, to the supervisor, Mike Stone, to the examiners.
All right, give it to me.
One of the sloppiest features of Mike's thesis is the rampant copy-pasting of entire sections across chapters, with identical errors left untouched. The methods section, in chapters 4 and 5, are near verbatim clones of those in chapter 3, reproducing the exact same typos, the exact same formatting mistakes, and the exact same structural oversights, of which there are many, which is strong evidence that large portions of the thesis were duplicated wholesale without even a cursory proofread. For instance, all 3 chapters contain the same numbering error. 2 consecutive items in a numbered list are labelled 4, an error that appears on pages 40, 62, and 87. Typos like mid-thing pull instead of mid-thigh pull show up first on page 44 and reappear on page 68.
Stop.
The phrase test rest reliability, rather than test retest, appears.
So even in the best case scenario, he would have had to copy this same phrase over and over again without proofreading it a single time. Chat, that would be the equivalent of me copying this sentence and then pasting it 3 separate times without even reading what it says. That's insane.
Is on 3 different pages. Clunky
Like you
and
have to you have to go out of your way to not read what you're copying and pasting. So he doesn't read it. He's just like, oh, this is what I need. Copy, paste it. I'm not reading that either. And then he moves on. And then he does that again a separate time.
Grammatical phrasing, such as shown determinative instead of shown to be determinative, is copied across pages 42 and 65. Even complex citation strings with missing punctuation, inconsistent spacing.
The errors are crazy to me. I wrote my
misformatted
dissertation. My major professor's committee in school library, you had to submit and check over it many times. They would eat my lunch if they found out formatting or errors. Even then, no one grilled him on his defense. Yeah, it's. I don't know how this came to be, but I guess you let a few slip through the cracks every now and then.
elements recur word for word in multiple locations. On pages 61 and 86, Mike writes, a large group of athletes was tested in strength, RFD, strength, power, short distance sprinting, and body composition measures.
And strength, again.
No,
you have to understand, the strength happening twice is by design.
Strength is included twice in the same list. This reads more like Kino parody than kinesis.
Like, do people not read their own essays out loud? I thought that was a thing that people would do. It's like one of the first things that my English professors taught me to catch errors like this is you read it out loud. And you'll notice, wait, why does it say that twice? It's too humiliating. More humiliating than getting called out a decade later in an hour-long YouTube video that got 1 million views in 5 days. Is it more humiliating than that? Because that could happen to you, chat. That could happen to you. This is the best way to refine a paper. He was to focus on his gains. I get it.
Theology.
Ever since I was 6 years old, I wanted to crack the code to building a body that was powerful, strong, and powerful.
That's such obvious mistakes made it into the...
I'm sorry. I knew it was coming, and I was in the middle of a yawn, but that was funny.
Ever since I was 6 years old, I wanted to crack the code to building a body that was powerful, strong, and powerful.
That such obvious mistakes made it into the final version not just once, but twice or even thrice, suggests that no one, not the author, not his supervisor, not the...
Or the author.
...examiners, was paying much attention. Mike doesn't just copy-paste across chapters, he even does it within them. On page 74, the exact same passage appears twice in a row, verbatim.
Stop. That's literally, honestly, of everything that was just said, that's the worst. Of everything that was just said, that is the worst. That confirms to me that nobody read this paper. The rest of it, I'm like, okay, sure. But like, that confirms to me nobody read this paper. Not a single other soul. Maybe not even Mike himself read this paper. You would literally notice if you are reading a paper that the same paragraph happens one after the other. Like, are you serious?
This pattern of duplication and error isn't just a sign of laziness. It raises serious doubts about whether much of the thesis was meaningfully reviewed at all. Mike's thesis, written in 2013, was required to comply with the APA 6th edition, the mandated style guide of East Tennessee State University's Sports Science and Coach Education Department. The thesis repeatedly fails to follow even the most basic rules.
4.2.3.2? What are we doing here? Okay. What are we doing here? Section 4.2.3.2. What's next? Section 4.2.3.2, subsection A? How many levels down are we going to go?
APA 6 citation and formatting. In-text citations are riddled with errors. Author groups are separated by commas instead of semicolons. Ampersands are replaced with and. Commas and periods are frequently misplaced or omitted. Punctuation appears before citations instead of after them. And bizarre constructions appear with inexplicable doubling up.
Come on. Are you serious? What are we doing? Literally nobody looked over this. You want to say ignored all the red squiggles that show up on MS Word? Yes.
Of brackets and periods. The problems don't end with citations in the body text. The reference lists themselves are an untamed mess. Across 4 separate bibliographies, Mike fails to italicize journal names, misformats volume and issue numbers, botches page ranges, uses commas.
He knew that he could just use EasyBib to do it, by the way. Like, you could just, it's not even that difficult to do. EasyBib is right there. It's right there. EasyBib wouldn't make this many errors. It would not. Thoughts on this crash out? You just sent me a random blog clip. What is... What is this referring to? I was muted.
The Netanyahu ultra right-wing hawkish version of Israel that's been prevalent for the last decade and a half, 15-ish years, maybe 20 years, probably 2 decades, right? Ever since the second Intifada. You guys realize like there was like an Israel that was much more chill, right?
That's not...
Arabs and Jews lived relatively peaceful in the Ottoman Empire. Okay, pause. Do not... Okay. Let's pause there. Don't ever glaze the Ottoman Empire. Don't... Do you know what the Ottoman Empire did to people? Whoa. Pause.
Okay. This has nothing to do with this discussion, so I won't spend too much time on it. But it is kind of funny to like be like, guys, you know that there was an Israel that was actually a little bit chill, you know, like 30 years ago, to then being like, you know that the Arabs and Jews lived relatively peaceful in the Ottoman Empire. I'd be like, what is this glazing that you're doing? You know, why are you glazing the Ottoman Empire? And it's not even like a glazed message, right? Like it's not necessarily like I don't read this as like this chatter is glazing the Ottoman Empire. It gets better. Okay, sure.
Joe, buddy, the Ottoman Empire is lucky that Nazi Germany came along to basically take from them the goats of genocide. Okay, like,
I don't want to be uncharitable. To say that like I understand what he means. But like I personally wouldn't have phrased it like that. Like, you know what I mean? Tradition of the Bengal famine was really looked at with Nazis being the big bads of history. Like, I understand the perspective that he's making, and that like he's saying it's just like, you know, the Ottoman Empire had its own atrocities, but like you don't have to like hand it to the Nazis, right? Which again, I don't even think that he was trying to do. But it's just like the phrasing of it could have been better. You know what I mean? It could have been better. It could have been better, right? It did come off. I understand how it came off. Is why I'm saying it. But that's my thoughts. Those are my 3 thoughts. 1, the phrasing is just very bad because it does sound like it's coming off as like, you know, I don't know, not a defense, right? But it feels like it frames the Nazis in a positive light unnecessarily a little bit. Because it like frames like the Ottoman Empire as like a bigger evil than the Nazis. But again, I know that's not Blau's intentions. But 2, the comment from the user didn't even feel like a glaze of like the Ottoman Empire, right? So even this reaction feels a bit, you know, it feels like a bit of an overreaction, because they weren't even being like, yeah, dog, the Ottoman Empire was great. It was just like Arabs and Jews lived relatively peaceful in the Ottoman Empire, right? Like, so that it, and again, I'm not even saying that like Blau can't criticize the Ottoman Empire, right? But the point is that it feels like an overreaction to like this specific comment, which is talking about one specific aspect of the Ottoman Empire in comparison to the framing that Israel has that like, you know, Jews aren't safe around Arabs and Arabs are bad and, you know, whatever, right? That's number 2. And number 3, that immediately following being like, guys, don't you remember that there was a chill Israel like 40 years ago? It's also a bit weird because like, you know, the inception of Israel was done as a way to effectively take Palestinian land, right? And, you know, cleanse land of Palestinians in the first place and push Palestinians off of their own land. And that's not like chill, and it was never chill in its inception in the first place. There's no chill Nakba, you know? There's not. And so like those 3 things together just reads entirely as, I'm trying to describe it in a way that like it's, you know, makes sense, but it doesn't come across as good. You feel me? Was I really talking about pre-October 7th when he didn't know or care? I don't even say that Blau didn't know or care about Israel before October 7th, right? Because again, I don't know the although like streamers, Blau is one of the more political like ones, which is why he's having the conversation in the first place. Right? But like he specifically referred to like pre the Second Intifada, and like he said 20 to 30 years ago. Right? I am curious about where this goes, so I'm gonna keep this tab open. To be charitable, this comes across as a Zoomer who's never read much about the issue and is operating off a basic white cultural milieu without much critical thought. It comes off extremely young and naive. I mean, sure, but like that thought process wouldn't come from like being like there was a chill Israel, you know? There was a time where Israel was more chill. Because I Charlie's Gaza video, first person I thought about was you, and I said he was gonna do it last week, but 6 months later. Yeah, I did say that. But I did see a clip of it, which we'll talk about a little bit today. But yeah, no, well, I'll get back to it because I am curious about where this goes and like what his like full take is, but it's not particularly relevant. And we're halfway through this video. I want to kind of power through it.
Where colons should be, and vice versa, inconsistently applies punctuation after journal titles, and freely oscillates between different spacing conventions. One reference alone, Cormier et al. 2010C, manages to misspell science as sense, list a physically impossible page range, implying that the article ends before it
went backward. Okay, that's kind of funny. That's kind of funny. I don't even know how you do this. How do you do this? I don't even know.
Begins. It omits necessary spacing after punctuation, and it inserts a comma before the final period for good measure. This exact citation appears uncorrected on pages 52, 78, and 109. Such duplications not only reinforce the impression of thoughtless copy-pasting, but point to a total collapse of any editorial review process. Basic spelling errors are everywhere. Mike misspells the word vertical as vetical or vetrical, individual as invididual, properties as propertites, biomechanics as biomechanins, neural as neural, training as traininiger, science